Yes, your boy Crypto Blood, and welcome to another Kicking the Session. Today I've got attorney Manny Alicandro. I hope I'm saying that right. I asked him like 4 times how to pronounce his last name.
It's good. That's right. Thank you.
Manny, so glad to have you on. And
Thanks for having me on.
honestly, I just randomly was going through my followers, right? And I see you, and I go onto your Twitter feed, and I'm seeing all these tweets that you're putting out, and I'm like, this guy. He can smell the BS coming from Washington up on the hill.
Thank you.
I'm like, let me get him on. I see he's into crypto a little bit. I don't know
am?
if you, yeah. So we'll talk about that and everything. But Manny, again, thank you for joining me for another Kick in the Session.
Great.
And will you tell the audience why you picked Paradise City, Guns N' Roses? That's a classic right there.
I'm a big Guns N' Roses fan. You know, all these people on social media say "Okay, Boomer," so
Yeah.
I'm gonna act like an "Okay, Boomer" and play something that they probably have never heard of, or their parents play. Wow. So I'm gonna act like a boomer and say Paradise City.
All right, there you have it, people. So again, thanks for coming on. I've got a couple of topics for us. We got a lot going on in today's world, man. It's crazy right now. I mean, where do you want to start? You want to start with Trump? Do you want to start with the coronavirus?
You can start with Trump. Let's start with Trump.
Let's start with Trump, man. He's been acquitted, which it's funny because I feel like we should have known this was going to happen. Like, the two articles that they brought forth were horrible. Too vague. Why didn't they bring no quid pro quo? Why no bribery? They spent all that time, and they bring the weakest articles to the Senate. Give me your thoughts on
absolutely.
The whole
I mean,
process.
Look, the whole thing.
To the Senate.
The whole thing, it is and was a nothing burger. Now, let's be clear. There was this phone call, and there's debate about whether the phone call was adequate, appropriate, whatever. All terms that, really don't lead into articles of impeachment in terms of high crimes and misdemeanors as viewed by the founding fathers like Hamilton, for example, in the Federalist Papers, right? So this has happened before. Unfortunately, it'll happen again in terms of, impeachment, but we learned lessons from the past. Obviously, Bill Clinton was impeached, the most recent president impeached, and before that, Nixon and then Johnson. But at the end of the day, look, the behavior of the president is what it is. What he did on the phone call is what it was. But with that being said, we have a very polarized society right now. Congress is very polarized, right? So they move forward with these articles of impeachment. Now, if they clearly had a bribery charge, if they had the evidence of bribery, they would have charged him with bribery, right? Absolutely. So this like obstruction charge, it's really a BS charge, and I'll tell you why. Because if you get served with a subpoena, you have every right, particular if you're a president, to exert executive privilege. So by using the courts is not obstruction. Obstruction is what Richard Nixon did, was deleting tapes. So right back in the day, I know the audiences, might not believe this, but there were actually cassette recorders, and there were capabilities of erasing tapes, kind of like old school VHS tapes, like cassettes, right?
You mean how Hillary did with the 13,000 emails?
Exactly.
Right?
So
okay.
So there's part of that tape within Richard Nixon's the whole Watergate matter, where he taped conversations in the White House, and they subpoenaed those tapes, and he provided the tapes, but there were gaps in terms of what he submitted. So clearly somebody went in and erased things that they didn't want to be heard. Okay. That's obstruction of justice. It's like literally shredding documents. Like when Nancy Pelosi, after the State of the Union, like tore up the State of the Union speech, that is obstruction, like destroying records.
We're gonna get to that one. Yeah.
But going to court is, he has every right, and he could fight that as long as he wants to and as hard as he has to with regard to executive privilege. So, the impeachment thing really never had a chance. It didn't have the legs that it needed to get him, Trump, a conviction and then a removal in the Senate, because the votes weren't there. He already secured his votes with the Republican leadership and Mitch McConnell. Obviously,
the thing. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I really want to get this point across: is that people probably don't even realize it because they're watching mainstream media and they're being brainwashed. people fail to realize he actually got a partisan vote, a nonpartisan vote on a no impeachment in the House. He got like 3 or 4 Democrats that.
Exactly. Great point. But I was going to say the one traitor turncoat
Oh,
to the Republican Party, Willard Romney. I'm not even going to call him Mitt. I'm going to call him by his legal name, Willard, because it sounds like such a nerd, right? It sounds like a nerdish dude from like Revenge of the Nerds with like the glasses with like the tape on the nose and stuff. I mean, that's what Willard sounds like. I cannot believe the guy did this. It is political suicide.
But didn't he play it safe by only doing it for one article and not the others? Like,
I think he blew himself up because if you watch Trump's speech today, he clearly went after Willard, and he thanked Senator Lee, who's the other senator in Utah, for doing the right thing. So Willard, in a weak moment, and if you saw his speech yesterday, he should get the Academy Award on Sunday.
Wasn't it
for best dramatic acting? He was like, excuse me, it's very emotional to me, and I'm very religious. I'm like, give me a break. What a crock of BS, okay? The guy did it because he felt like he wants to be a never Trumper, okay? So there's no one clearly running. There's Joe Walsh or whatever, but there's no one running against Trump in a primary. So he wants to be, God forbid something happens to Trump, he wants to be in pole position to say, okay, pick me, choose me, or maybe in a wild scenario, he's like Mike Bloomberg's vice president, pick. They do some kind of fusion ticket or something.
I heard that theory. Yeah. Can you explain to the audience? I've heard of obstruction of justice, but what does obstruction of Congress mean? That's a little different. I've never heard of that term before until this whole.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, it's the same thing. So it's obstruction. It's justice, meaning obstruction for the courts. So in terms of the justice system, so I get a subpoena, I get a discovery production request from a court in a state court or a federal court or whatever, and I don't comply with that subpoena or request. So that's obstruction of justice. Obstruction of Congress is Congress cannot move forward unless witnesses testify. So there's all this question about Nick Mulvaney and John Bolton, and that Trump said, and Don McGahn, who was Trump's counsel, Trump said, no, they're not going to participate in any witness testimony because of executive privilege. So that's really obstructing Congress from moving forward with this impeachment investigation. That's really what the charges were, which is absolutely silly because if you go back a major step, we're forgetting about one thing, and his name is Robert Mueller. I mean, we spent 2 years,
$40 million,
$40 million flushed. I mean, do your viewers, listeners hear the toilet bowl right now? $40 million of taxpayer money flushed down the toilet. Now, they thought Pelosi, Jerry Nadler, Adam Schiff, right? They all felt that the smoking guns were going to emanate and come from this Mueller report, but it was nothing. So then all of a sudden they get this whistleblower, which is kind of crazy. And I've dealt with whistleblowers in the past, right? Whistleblowers have to have integrity, first of all. Secondly, it's bogus when a whistleblower doesn't have firsthand knowledge. What do I mean by that? I mean that, hey, I'm talking to you now. That's a direct conversation. If you and me have a discussion or I have a discussion with someone else, that's firsthand knowledge. Maybe I'm in an elevator or I'm having a conversation with other people and I directly overhear the conversation. I see something directly with my eyeballs. I hear it with my ears. This whistleblower is predicated on hearsay. Hearsay is bogus in any kind of case. It's all circumstantial evidence, and you really want direct witness testimony. So if this whistleblower really had the goods on Trump, I'm sure he or she, whoever they may be, would have come forward. But clearly they just wanted to start the process, right? Assuming that it was going to snowball and all these other people were going to come out of the woodwork and come, from behind the shadows. And you look at like John Bolton, right? So if you look at last weekend, we knew we were going to have Trump was going to be acquitted on Wednesday, but maybe not, because now all of a sudden John Bolton has a book. And now we want John Bolton to testify. I mean, that's problematic. If you're like trying to gin up book sales by claiming to have the goods on a president and violating national security, I got a problem with that.
You know what really sealed that one, though, was the fact that one clip came out on John Bolton talking about Ukraine, and yeah,
Yeah.
Trump is, nothing, basically saying nothing was wrong, nothing, that came out as well, and that really put it. And I actually remember, and I retweeted Trump when he said "game over" when that leak came
Absolutely. I
out.
mean, he's an insider. So look, he's trying to gin up his book sales, and I get it. But at the end of the day,
But
you've
that's
got to be
another,
really
we're laughing, I'm laughing about the situation and stuff, but I feel like, Manny, we've gotten to a low point in America in politics. Politics, to me, has always been something that was kind of dirty anyway. But it
right.
just seems like it's gotten to a point, man. Can we recover from such? I mean, from Nancy Pelosi shredding the State of the Union. I mean, it's just I feel like we're at a low point, man.
You're right. I agree. I mean, it's always been a gladiator sport. I would say that, but every day is hand-to-hand combat, and people are looking for blood. And what's troubling to me is we all know what the problems are in the country and the world, right? We all know we want to be healthy. We want our children and families to be healthy. We want to be wealthy, and we want to be safe. I mean, that's not really a complicated calculus. And by God, why haven't we done anything with regard to infrastructure? I mean, this country is old. I live in New York City. The subways are like 100 years old.
Right.
Right. The bridges and tunnels are like built, in the 1950s, and we're still paying crazy tolls. The Verrazano Bridge from Brooklyn to Staten Island is like $20. I mean, it's outrageous.
But
And
we're giving billions of dollars to Ukraine, Iran,
yeah,
Iraq, and
it's like I go by the UN, right? And you see all these guys, well dressed, finely tailored suits. They're from very
mm-hmm,
poor countries. They get driven in limousines. They go to the best restaurants. I mean, where's that money
right.
coming from? And we're giving money to the UN. The UN's giving money to these countries and these leaders. I mean, and the people getting the money that they deserve, right? That they need. These people are starving. That's why, and that's what really attracted me to crypto, right? Is I want a way for people to be empowered, right? And I want people, particularly in unbanked countries, to
Yeah.
be able to control their own destiny. Because as well as I do, that if you give money to some corrupt leader in Africa or South America, the people are not getting that money. They're just not.
Nope.
They're
They're
not.
not.
And they
You're
haven't.
right.
And we haven't learned lessons in the past. I mean, how much more it is to me to go through to realize those people are not getting the money.
So that's a perfect segue into kind of the next subject, and that is crypto. Guys, as you can see on the screen, I'm on Manny's website. He actually is a former candidate of New York Attorney General office and an NYC public advocate. He's got a lot of experience in compliance, regulatory, and governance, and he's also worked with, I think, the NASDAQ and FINRA. Is that correct? You've worked
Yes,
with them as well.
correct.
So you're now into this crypto space, blockchain space, and more. Is it more so on the side of the markets as far as like exchanges and trading?
Hmm.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that. Because here's my thing. I would consider myself an OG crypto guy. I got in about 7 years ago, right?
Great.
And at that point, it was not any of this. It was no FINRA involvement, no crypto mom, no no SEC stuff. And I feel like it's almost like water and oil, man. Like, can the two really coexist? Can they? Because it's almost like Bitcoin was created to eliminate these types of entities and regulatory. So kind of give me your stance on that, and you're working actively with these companies, or I should say regulatory agencies. Kind of give me your stance on Bitcoin meet Wall Street. Like, what is that something that we should be cheering for?
I think we should. I think we're a long way away from that for a couple of
Okay.
reasons, right? One is that Bitcoin in its purest form could be, the most revolutionary beneficial thing with regard to what we're talking about earlier, like unbanked,
Yes.
um, immutability in terms of the blockchain, right? In terms of payments, which, ultimately I think Libra will be successful. Facebook will be successful with Libra and really obviate banks, but we're years away from
We'll
that.
have to talk. Yeah, I may have to have you back on that one.
And the
I,
reason is because of what we're talking about earlier with the fact that this is all politicized. So if you look at when Zuckerberg testified a couple of years ago, it was about privacy, and the Democrats were generally supportive of him, and the Republicans were not. When he testified more recently about Libra, both the Democrats and Republicans were against him. Okay. And that was because their constituent base, the financial services firms, payment processors, credit cards, and banks. So if you kind of look at a Libra, for example, obviating banks, Facebook has a very successful business model. Usually when you start a business, you have to get customers. So everybody asks the question, you watch Shark Tank, what's your customer acquisition
cost? Their vertical is 2 billion people
Exactly. They have the people. It's figuring out how to sell them stuff and get it to them, right? So they're in a unique situation. So for them to turn on a payment processor and say, hey, you want to pay your mortgage? Hey, you want to pay a credit card? We won't charge you, and they'll make money on the back end of it, and they essentially obviate all the intermediaries who make money when you use your credit card, right? So there's a lot of opportunity for that to happen, but there's a lot of political resistance because these banks are stakeholders. These banks provide political contributions, and most importantly, they provide jobs. The problem,
that's what I'm saying, Manny. I don't see it ever being a case where Libra is allowed to operate in its current form. I mean,
it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a while, and they're going to work out a compromise. Okay, so you won't see like JP Morgan Chase won't be put out of business. Okay, they're gonna kind of have lines, demarcation lines. Like North Korea, South Korea. They're gonna say like you could do up to this on Libra, or they'll do a joint venture so the banks make money. You won't see the banks like totally out of it. Eventually, you'll see the banks maybe phased out of certain aspects of it. But kind of pivoting back to Bitcoin, right? The problem that I think is that exists right now and resonating in the Bitcoin market is the fact that there's a lack of transparency. So what I mean by that is if you buy a share of Google today, or you buy Facebook today, right? You can see the depth of book, right? So you can see all the prices that people are buying and selling Facebook at, or want to buy Facebook at. Pretty much globally, wherever Facebook's trading, it's all linked. Okay, so there's just interoperability. There's a connection that says, okay, that's the best bid and that's the best offer. That's the best price to buy or the best price to sell. When you look at price of Bitcoin, right, say at Coinbase, right, say it's 9,800. That's not really reflective of the OTC market. There's no central repository for Bitcoin, and I'm not suggesting there should be, because now we're going to get into centralized versus decentralized. I'm trying to say if you want to use Bitcoin and compare it to like a currency, like the British pound or the euro, okay, there has to be more transparency. The reason I'm bringing this up is because the SEC has denied like 10 applications for a Bitcoin exchange traded fund or an exchange traded product, ETF, ETP. And the reason is because the SEC always says, look, guys, you can't have a product that trades based upon something else, meaning that the ETF or ETP will trade based upon Bitcoin, but we don't really know what that price of Bitcoin is. So we're not comfortable that you're going to surveil that. In other words, how could you have something tracked?
Yeah, because they can't control all of the various exchanges that kind of net makes up the spot price of Bitcoin. It's not 100%. Centralized. Yeah.
And if I trade with you, I mean, if people trade large size, whatever, and then sometimes there's going to be a discount. Is that reflected in the price of Bitcoin? So if the price of Bitcoin on Coinbase is 9,800 right now, let's say hypothetically, and somebody buys it at 9,600. What does that do to the price? I'm still buying at 98. Someone bought at 96. You can't negotiate a price for Facebook. The price of Facebook is what it is. Everybody's buying and selling the same price. So that's the problem in a nutshell, that you're talking about Main Street, how to bring Bitcoin and crypto. I'm not even talking about ICOs.
Yeah, the situation that you described, though, Manny, sounds like one that can't be fixed. And that's why I've been always very opinionated and had a strong opinion about the ETFs, and it not based on what the SEC's guidelines are currently. They'll never pass one.
I think it can be fixed, and how it could be fixed is a voluntary reporting. So in other words, these trades that are done OTC, they could be reported anonymously, because nobody cares who did the trade. You want to know what the prices were. So if you have price discovery and price transparency, boom, that's what you need. And if you could convince the SEC that you know what those prices are, obviously, look, the SEC's biggest concern is manipulation. right? They're concerned that any market, right? Like people talk about the Russian market, you're talking about currency, stuff like that. People are concerned with the lack of integrity of that market. So people are worried, like I buy something in the Russian
Like the
market and
LIBOR rate.
it's not exactly, and it even happens with the big boys and the big banks. So like, who can
Yeah.
you trust? Pretty much no
Right.
one. But it's all about transparency and discovery. It's shedding light on what's going on, and if there's a way for these trades to be reported somehow, and there are metrics right now if you read those ETF filings, but the SEC is not as comfortable. The CFTC is more comfortable. But nonetheless, the SEC is really controlling the applications, those rule filings for getting approval for the ETFs and ETPs. As long as those won't be approved, I think Bitcoin won't have more mass adoption. But I think with that being said, we're getting there. I also think there's a big focus right now when you look at Bitcoin, right? There's a big focus on, price in terms of, the regulators also getting better with a chain analysis, right? So when you
Yeah,
when
they
you
are.
when you buy and sell securities, you know who you're buying and selling from. Right now, there's pseudo anonymous wallets, so it's even hard to tell. Is the Bitcoin or the cryptocurrency residing in some terrorist, God forbid, some terrorist account? Or people
Yeah.
using it to facilitate terrorism. I mean, look at that. Look at Virgil Griffiths, right? Are you familiar with who Virgil Griffiths was?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The guy that went over to North Korea.
That is the most underreported story of 2019. I mean, that to me, when I heard that story, I said, my God, that should be on every news station and people should be talking about that. It's like, how crazy is that there's people teaching these bad countries to evade sanctions by using crypto? I mean, that not only in and of itself is bad, that kills the credibility of the market. So,
Hmm.
we have Hester, Crypto Mom, we have Crypto Dad, we have Giancarlo, supporting us. But at the end of the day, I participated in the tax autonomy bill. I spoke at the
Oh, okay.
Library of Congress, and you got senators, you got people on a financial services committee at a House. They're hell bent on thinking that crypto and Bitcoin in particular propagates human trafficking, prostitution, and illicit drug use in the dark web. And it's really hard
I
for
mean,
us
yeah,
to move them away from that. And I'm not saying they're 100% wrong. They're
no, they're
clearly not
not.
100% right. But the point is
Yeah.
there has to be a happy medium where we all could agree.
I
But if
mean,
people
because
have that point of view, how
the
do we get
U.S.
them off that
dollar
point of
is
view?
I heard Steve Mnuchin say that once. Like Bitcoin, the U.S. dollar isn't used for nefarious activities and stuff. It's the number one
Absolutely, it's
vehicle.
cash. I mean, that's
Yeah,
the easiest
cash.
thing.
Yeah,
It's not traced. If I go on the street and people
right.
buy illicit drugs or whatever in the street, it can't be tracked. There is a way to track the movement of crypto, but you're exactly
Yes.
right. When I always tell people, when you're trying to figure out what's going on and why things are the way they are, you have to look at two things. One, you got to look at people's mindset. Okay,
Okay.
so you already hit the nail on the head with Steve Mnuchin. Also, Trump is doesn't like
He's
Bitcoin, and Trump's
anti-beat. Yep.
talked about Bitcoin and that USD is better than Bitcoin. And the second thing is
We know that. We
incentives.
know why.
Of course. The second thing is incentives, right? So what is incentivizing the SEC, the CFTC, whomever, any regulators in the US to change things right now, to make
I
things
don't
better,
see it,
more
man.
transparent?
I don't see any incentive.
100%. They don't.
Yeah.
They don't. That
Okay.
right now, we're kind of moving sideways, and I don't perceive us moving in any different direction for a
So
while.
you're an insider, I would say, with this whole crypto and regulatory Wall Street relationship that's right now maybe at a snail's pace. But is there anything you can share with my audience that you would like to kind of let them know what's going on behind the scenes, like not kind of on CoinDesk or Cointelegraph or any of these crypto media sites? What's going on behind the scenes in crypto, good or bad, that you see?
Well, I mean, look, it's a great question. I mean, clearly the ICO market is dead, right? So
Yeah.
people are doing ICOs offshore, not open to U.S. investors, and that makes sense. You can understand why, because you have a lot
Hmm.
of scammy ICOs here. I get it. Um, Both the SEC and the CFTC, believe it or not, have done a lot to better educate themselves and created respective labs and sandboxes, and they are very cooperative to the extent that projects want to work with them. So you could reach out to the SEC and meet with them. But at the end of the day, it's not going to move the needle, right? And not move the dial. I think the future is going to be STOs, right? So securities token offerings, those to me are what's going to drive this industry. And if you want to see anything security like outside of, Bitcoin and Ethereum and Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin, right? The usual suspects, if you will, in terms of what will trade in terms of like tokens, you will see STOs. I think the STO market will be booming. It just needs to get to the next level. There were a couple of STOs that were issued, but they're issued pursuant to a private placement. So there's a 12-month lockup. So the lockups are
Right.
coming off right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
now the question is, where do they trade? Do they trade on a platform? Do they trade on an exchange? Because they are become freely tradable. If you do a private placement of securities, you have to hold them for 12 months. And then after 12 months, they become freely tradable. So right now, the ones that were done, in 18, 19 are freely tradable or coming due to become freely tradable. And then you'll see more of that. But I think the STO market's where it's at. ICOs are done unless they're offshore and they're not open to U.S. Investors. With that being said, there's great places like Bermuda, has great pro crypto regulation. Liechtenstein has great, where these countries have actually created a digital asset rulemaking authority, and they're great. But again, look at Bermuda and look at Liechtenstein. They don't have the levels of government. Here we have, local government, state government, federal government. In New York, you have Division of Financial Services covering a BIT license. So not only you have SEC, CFTC, you have state regulators, right? Then you have OFAC, FinCEN, and the alphabet soup.
See,
I refer to them as alphabet soup of regulators.
Crypto was supposed to circumvent it. I guess I mean it just is what it is, Manny. I guess my pie in the sky vision of no bankers one day, it's just not gonna happen, man.
No, you raise a good point, but I tell people this, right? So kind of talk about this a little earlier in terms of what we all should agree upon. The most highly regulated things in the world, pretty much regardless of what country you're in, regardless of what your zip code is,
finance,
are health services, right? Doctors, medical records, right?
Yeah.
Children taking care of our kids, right? And their safety, and money.
Yep,
So
money.
so when you're talking about crypto, and you're talking about money, and you're talking about taking someone's money and investing it or whatever, now you become a fiduciary.
Right.
You have an obligation under the law to not abscond those funds, to make sure that you and that investor have a relationship. Now that I laid all that out, that has to be regulated. Now we're talking about a security or a commodity, and inherent with that, there are regulations.
Let's talk about security or commodity or money or asset commodity. What do you see Bitcoin as? I personally think it's not money. It's too slow. It's too volatile. Maybe in the future, I don't know. Maybe 10 years from now, whatever. But as it stands right now, I see Bitcoin as an asset. Like
I mean, Bitcoin.
gold.
Look, Bitcoin is property as defined by the IRS. Bitcoin is property. So we got taxes coming up on April 15th, right? Bitcoin is property. So when people have to show their capital gains, Bitcoin is viewed as property. Under the law, Bitcoin is now deemed a commodity. And Judge Weinstein, who is a federal court judge in Brooklyn, was literally, believe it or not, was appointed by JFK. He had a case a couple of years ago and determined that Bitcoin is a commodity, and the CFTC has backed that up. So it is statutorily under the law a commodity. Nonetheless, commodities are regulated. They're not regulated like securities, but the CFTC is the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. They regulate the trading commodities, which could be soybeans, could be pork bellies, could be financials.
But with that said, though, Manny, that means that under the legislation currently we have it as it's not advantageous for a person to spend Bitcoin on a daily basis, because each transaction for, I would assume, both the person spending the Bitcoin and the person accepting it, the vendor, those are taxable events. Am I correct?
Correct. So we need tax relief, and I understand that there was another bill. There were a couple of bills that were proposed, and the House changed in 2018.
Or something.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, what happens is Maxine Waters respectfully becomes the chair of the House Financial Services Committee. AOC's on that committee, and they're impeached 45, impeached 45. So they've been focused on impeachment, and we were making good progress both on a tax autonomy bill, which was to federalize. Now, why does securities work so well trading in this country? There's state regulators. There's New York state regulator. There's New Jersey. Every state has their own regulator, right, under their attorney general of the state. But but they let the SEC kind of run the show, and the states work cooperatively. In crypto and digital assets, it's kind of free for all. All the alphabet super regulators kind of fight for each other and against each other. Okay, so it's problematic, and sometimes they fight against each other. There was an issue a couple of years ago where the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency came out with a fintech bank. So in other words, like, we want to start a bank. We're not like going to compete with JP Morgan. So there's more limited requirements, and it's cheaper to do it. And it's a federally chartered bank. The question is, if you become a federally chartered bank, can you just go into any state you want, say New York, and then do you need a BIT license? Well, the question is, now you do, believe it or not. So, unlike securities, the Division of Financial Services in New York holds and wields a lot of authority. You only got a couple of players holding a BIT license. It's very expensive. It's very difficult to get. And, to me, it's a barrier of entry. So, you're right. Not only in terms of like using Bitcoin to buy and sell things, but at the same time, trading Bitcoin is a high hurdle. If I wanted to create a trading entity to trade Bitcoin, a trading platform to trade Bitcoin or other altcoins, is extremely complicated, expensive, and highly regulated.
Interesting. So, I guess we can talk about now this whole coronavirus going on, man. This is you're in New York. How are citizens taking this whole situation right now? I know there was at least one case reported in New York. I don't know if it was in New York, like broader New York State, or in actual NYC.
Yeah, I think
What's
it was
going on
one. I
there?
think it was reported as one in New York. I mean, that in inherent, in and of itself is part of the problem. Is like after the 9/11, a lot of people feel that we never were told the truth.
Right.
And I'm not some kind of conspiracist, but I'm just being straight up that we don't know. We don't know. So
Yep.
if the CDC and New York City and New York State don't tell us things, we just don't know. Certain people don't care. Certain people are walking around like everything's fine. Then you go on a subway and you see a lot of people with the masks. I haven't seen
Yep.
anybody with gloves yet. I mean, I know I'm kind of whipping out the hand sanitizer and Purell every time I'm on the subway.
Hmm.
Constantly, I'm almost like an addict with it now. I've used it in the past, but now I'm super concerned about it. I mean, look, if you travel, think about it. If you travel, you have no idea who was on the bus, the subway, the train, Amtrak, or plane before you or after you. So you're leaving germs on a plane. There's germs on a plane when you get on. It's scary. It's scary because I don't think we're being given the information that we need to be given. I think the best thing people could do would be clearly avoid travel to China. Makes a lot of sense. But just be diligent, and to the extent where you really could wash your hands, don't rub your eyes. I know that like anytime I go out, I won't wear gloves. I won't be that extreme, but I'm very cognizant of my hands and making sure I don't touch my face or my nose.
Yeah, so Wuhan, it looks like the city of Wuhan just finished their second coronavirus hospital, which is it's amazing that they were able to put together two hospitals in the
Absolutely.
span of 2 weeks. It's just insane, right?
Imagine how long
Um,
that would take here. It would take 30 years. How many
regulatory,
people would die? So many people would
right?
die. Unfortunately, 1,000 people would be dead, and to be like
Yeah, right,
fighting
right.
about, the inspection is,
Yep, yep.
it should only be 5 floors and not, 6 floors. It's just kind of nonsense.
It is, it is. So, I think I personally still think they're underreporting. I think they're still underreporting the deaths and
Yeah, no, I think so. It could be. I mean, I'm
yeah.
very worried about, again, you have this, we're talking about, kind of tying this in, we talked about earlier, transparency,
Hmm.
right? Integrity, right? I mean, who believes what you hear from the government? Who believes what you hear from the Chinese government? I mean, that's the thing. So people are
More
doubtful.
than ever now, Manny. Like just seeing this whole thing going down with Trump, man. Like when he got elected, his whole motto was drain the swamp, right? And I'm like,
Right.
oh, okay, all right, Trump, come on now. Like, really? Are you really gonna drain the swamp? But like literally, he's been chomping at the bit, man. And you see them. It's like almost like when you have roaches, right? And you turn the lights on, you see them scattering. That's what's like. They're you see them coming out, like
I got to
all
tell you,
these.
you have not seen anything yet, right? Now that this impeachment, so kind of the way you have to look at it is you had this whole impeachment process, right? And I think the White House was scared at first, right? I think Trump was worried because he didn't know what direction this was going to go, right? I mean, you could have had more Mitt Romneys out there, Willard Romneys out there, right? And Trump's super powerful and very popular within his base. So the Democrats were really hell bent on beating Trump however they could, and they thought this would bloody up Trump. So you had this impeachment process. First you had Mueller, then you had impeachment in the House, articles of impeachment, and then you had the trial in the Senate. Now that's done, Trump's going to focus on 2020. Pretty comfortable and confident Trump's going to get reelected in 2020. Then I think it's going to be interesting. I really think Trump's angry at a lot of these people, and I'm not quite sure what direction things are going to get into. But I think there's going to be a lot of
Do
battles
you
like we've
think
never
there's
seen
going to
before.
be more impeachment attempts?
I keep hearing that. There very well could be, but I think it's absolutely silly. I think we need to stand up as taxpayers because you talked about Mueller and how much that cost. How much has this whole impeachment nonsense cost us? Tens of millions of bucks.
Absolutely.
And I don't think we're any better off today than we were a couple of weeks ago. We knew how it was going to end. And if you have a
Well,
problem with
anyone that
Trump,
didn't watch CNBC, not CNBC, MSNBC, CNN, or any of those other liberal networks definitely knew what was going to happen because the facts
of
were written on
course.
the wall.
Yeah, and their
I
ratings
mean,
crashed. The ratings crashed after Mueller. I mean, you could see it. It's pretty clear. Ratings went down dramatically after the Mueller report came out. Look, at the end of the day, we should be happy that the economy's is really doing great, right?
yeah,
We have
it's
we have
interesting to
jobs, we have
see.
low unemployment.
Well, that's the thing about you kind of touching on the economic numbers. It's interesting to see that the Democrats seem to just want to ignore those points. Even at the State of the Union address last
Mhm.
night, they sat there and were shaking their heads
Yeah,
when they
they almost
said
want to see a recession. They almost want to
African
see a recession.
American unemployment lowest it's ever been. They just ignore that. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like I don't understand.
what you're seeing right now too is what I call like selective enforcement. So you're seeing like certain people get in trouble for certain things, others don't. People are kind of picking and choosing what they want to focus on, what's good and what's bad. I mean, you can't ignore these numbers. It's not just an aberrant kind of exception. Month over month, the economic numbers are incredible. The
Now, I
stock
will have
market's
to
incredible.
say, a lot of it has to do with Trump, but we also have to give credit to the Fed and their easy money policy, right?
100%, 100%. But at the same time, the president, both takes the blame if the economy's doing
Absolutely.
poorly, and it should be
Should
rewarded when the
yeah.
economy,
Yeah.
does well and appraised.
How long do you think this gravy train will last? Do you think I think he's going to be reelected? But I'm not too sure. We're getting hot, man, with the stock market. We saw Tesla touch
It's
960
crazy.
bucks the other day. You got Barron's, I forgot his first name, big Wall Street guy, investment guy. He's saying he's not selling a single share.
Hmm.
I'm just like, this is getting out of control. Like, do you think how much longer do you? I mean, we don't know. None of us know.
Hmm.
But what is your feeling about where we are with the stock market and its valuations right now?
I think we got a long way to go.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think if you look at the price of stocks, and I was speaking to an economist about this the other day. I mean, the stocks are not overpriced. I mean, people think because the Dow's gone up dramatically. I mean, if you look at the earnings ratios,
Yeah, we're at
some of these
like
prices,
36 something, right? 36 times earnings.
yeah, which is comparative to if you look at bubbles that we had, like the internet bubble,
Yeah,
they were over two,
40,
100,
right? Oh,
way
100?
above 40, 100, some of these
I
crazy
didn't know that.
value,
Okay.
crazy multiples. So the multiples don't really reflect that,
Got you. So
that
$40,000 on we're on our way.
I think
40,000.
we're on
We're
our
going to
way. I think Bitcoin right now, once Bitcoin blows through 10,000, I
yeah.
think there's a lot of resistance right now for the 10,000 number. I think if we get through 10,000, I mean, we're off to the races with Bitcoin. I think the thing that concerns me the most is what I spoke about earlier too, is a lack of infrastructure. Okay, so we're susceptible to some kind of attack. Okay, we have an old electric grid. The electric grid in this country is ancient. Our bridges and tunnels are literally crumbling. When I live in New York and I go to the airports, I mean, LaGuardia, they've spent millions of dollars to upgrade it. I mean, LaGuardia is a terrible airport.
Yeah, little bro.
So if
It's
we have
horrible.
airports that are problematic, we have an eroding infrastructure, and that makes us susceptible to some type of damage, right? Either something's going to break and not work, or we're
Well,
susceptible to a cyber attack. I mean, why couldn't?
remember what happened in 2003, though, right, Manny? I'm assuming back then you were on the East Coast. I'm in here in Michigan. Remember the blackout of '03,
Oh
'02,
yeah,
'03, or something like that?
absolutely.
That was scary, man. I mean, if that would have gone on for another 2, 3 days, it would have been pandemonium.
We had a blackout last year in New York in the summer. It was specific to certain neighborhoods,
Okay,
but people panicked because again, the method of communication wasn't there. The
right.
lack of transparency was there, where people didn't know what was going on. And if they lost power, maybe a cell phone died or whatever. You couldn't watch TV on the news. You could listen to the radio. Nobody listens to the radio anymore. But the point is like, you weren't getting alerts. So my concern is that terrorists figure out, okay, you know what, the U.S. is susceptible to some type of cyber attack. So I used to work at NASDAQ, right? And always the big fear of these exchanges is that people cannot communicate to their broker or to the exchange. The lines of communication between the broker and the exchange, or the customer and the broker, are frozen. Panic and pandemonium would set in, right? Because people like trying to sell their stock and they know they can't sell it, and other people become aware of that. It will just push those prices down. And that's my big fear, is that the market will keep running up as long as people are comfortable and confident in the integrity and the trustworthiness of that marketplace.
So I've never had the chance to ask a person that's really worked hand in hand with like a Nasdaq or ICE or whatever. Um, is there? I've heard this for many years. The DCC, right? The organization that holds the stock certificates or are supposed to settle
Mm-hmm.
stocks. Is that a real problem as far as do we have more float, more stocks out there, more shares of stocks than there really should be? Is that a true issue, or are you concerned with that?
No, I mean what I'm concerned about is that when we had Hurricane Sandy in New York
Yeah.
and the East Coast, right?
Yep.
DTCC is on Water Street in the financial district in Manhattan,
Mm-hmm. Seed
and
and co, whatever.
they keep all the physical stock certificates, because people still have physical stock certificates. They kept them in a vault, and a vault was like below sea level, and again, another
And
underreported story.
and the fire too, right?
Yes, and what happened was the water came in, and essentially, sometimes people have these bearer bonds, and we don't
Yes,
know who
bearer
owns them,
bonds.
right?
Yes,
And the
yes.
actual numbers on the bonds was
It,
washed off from the
can
water.
you explain that to the audience? Some may not know about bearer bonds.
Yeah, sure. So people own these bonds, and they're maintaining a registration number only, kind of like a crypto, like a wallet.
Yep.
So it's pseudo anonymous. So people know it based upon the number of the bearer bond. It has the individual like QSIP number on it, but the name of the customer, the holder, the owner isn't on it. So like if I own shares of Facebook in my name, not street name, it says Manny Alicandro, 10 shares of Facebook. The bearer bond would just not have my name on it, and it would just have the number, and then I have proof that I own that bond, and then I go to, let's say, I have an account at Goldman Sachs. If I want to sell those bonds, I go to Goldman Sachs to sell my bonds. But the way those bonds are maintained at DTCC, there's no connection directly to me. Like my name's not on the bond, but I have the proof that I own that bond. The problem is when the number on the actual bearer bond became invisible effectively, what was washed off, you couldn't prove, so who owned the bond, because there's no name on it, there's no other identification. So I could prove, hey, I own bond ABC 123, and then they go to look at ABC 123 and the bond says ABC 12. So
Mm,
is it 123, 124? I mean, who knows, right? So it's a
wow.
major, basic stuff here, but major liability, in millions and millions of dollars. So, we're susceptible to the extent that we use technology. How do we know that technology works? I mean, I was just doing another show this morning. I do a show in New York called Liquid Lunch on Newsmax,
Oh,
and we were
okay.
Yeah, and we were talking about the Iowa caucus.
Oh
I
dang,
mean,
I didn't
for
know
the
you were that big, man. I got a heavy hitter on the show here,
I wouldn't
people.
say that. I wouldn't say that. But we were talking about Iowa, and like if you look at Iowa, this is the first time I don't know maybe ever that the Des Moines Register, right, did not come out with a final poll on
Oh
Sunday.
my God, that was
Why is
yeah.
that important? Because the Iowa caucus was on Monday, so the last
uh,
poll, and this is the Super Bowl for Iowa. This is not something that they could make a mistake at. Okay, this is like there's a major problem at the Super Bowl. This is every 4 years. This is
remember when the lights went out at the Super Bowl? This was that
Yes,
event, right?
exactly. This is like remember during the Sochi Olympics or something, and like there was a problem in Russia, and then it was a meme that Putin fired these people or something because there
Right,
weren't enough
right.
of the ovals there linked together or something on the emblem for the Olympic logo. But I mean, look, Iowa, this is their Super Bowl, and they completely screwed this up. Okay, so Sunday, no final Des Moines Register poll. Problem number one. They already said they had technical difficulties. No one thought that meant that would impact the Iowa caucus. Then you have all these questions about this app that people were using and his relationships between now. The Clintons came back into it. The Clinton name
Oh
has
my,
come up
I
again,
know,
and
man. They
Pete
just
Buttigieg and all this
you
stuff. I'm
can't
like,
get rid of those Clintons,
poor
man.
Bernie Sanders. Now, if the Iowa caucus, the Des Moines Register said, look, Bernie's got like 36%, nobody would show up on Monday. You see? So the problem is because there was no final poll by the Des Moines Register and there was all these technical glitches, more people showed up for Pete Buttigieg. Great for him, but was there foul play? Was there kind of
Had to
relationships
have
with
been
the
Manny.
Democratic Party in Iowa? I mean, I can't understand how they would screw this up this badly. This almost reeks of the Jeffrey Epstein, what Jeffrey
Mm-hmm.
Epstein did, commit suicide. Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself.
He
I mean,
didn't kill
how
himself.
could Iowa screw up so badly? It's almost convenient that
So
it
now,
consistently kept
now,
screwing up.
now they're talking about getting rid of the Iowa caucus
I,
because I mean, it's not. I don't know. First of all, how do you mess up an event where you just stand in a room and you get a head count?
Exactly.
I don't
I mean, it had
understand.
100. I mean, it had 100 something thousand votes to count. Putting aside technology, I mean, can't they just? It took them like 3 days to do that. I mean, even today, I think they're at 91%, and it seemed like when I saw earlier there was like a 0.1 percentage difference between Buttigieg was still leading Sanders. I mean, so I think they get the same number of delegates or whatever. But at the end of the day, that's extremely misleading because you get momentum behind you. So if you win Iowa, you got the tailwinds behind you to go into New Hampshire, and then you go into South Carolina, and you go to Nevada, and you rip it across the country, heading into the big days, right? The big Super Tuesday. So this is a major issue, and I think the federal government, from my perspective, needs to get involved. Right?
Oh,
There's
absolutely.
this reeks of
Perez.
corruption, and this reeks of interference and undue influence. And talking about quid pro quo, we keep hearing that. This for that, Latin this for that. I mean, this is quid pro quo to me. Right? People getting paid. People got paid to like a private company got paid to run the app. I mean, it reeks. You can't have a relationship between a campaign and a company that runs an
Correct.
app for the Democratic Party. I mean,
Insane.
the Iowa caucus, it's so important and it's so embarrassing, and I think it hurts our democracy. And instead of wasting time on this impeachment nonsense, it was so repetitive, as we know. I think there should be a congressional investigation in terms of what happened in Iowa. I mean, if I was affiliated with one of these candidates right now, and I was
Well,
either the candidate or
you see what Tulsi Gabbard is doing. She's suing Clinton, Hillary, and it's just when is enough enough? Like these people need to leave the DNC, man. It's just the worst thing I've ever seen in my
yeah, I
life.
mean
It's
they're
just
petrified of Bernie because Bernie. Let's be honest here, right? You're a good guy. I want to be straight with you, and I want to be straight with your audience, right? If Bernie gets the nomination, Trump will annihilate him. He will be, and you guys can go to Google and look up Barry Goldwater. Okay, look up Barry Goldwater. Barry Goldwater ran in 1964 against Lyndon Johnson and destroyed was destroyed by Lyndon Johnson. He's a conservative before conservatism was accepted and cool. Okay, to some circles, and then Reagan carried that mantle forward in '80. But the point is 76 and '80. But Goldwater was such a polarizing figure. He got destroyed by Lyndon Johnson. So the opposite side of the aisle is Bernie, right? He's not conservative. He's a communist. He really is a socialist. So you've never seen like a guy or a woman say, look, I am a communist. I'm a socialist. I want to be a president. In the United States, maybe in Cuba, maybe in Russia, maybe in some Eastern European country, East Germany, whatever, but Yugoslavia, in North Korea, in the United States, someone saying, I am a socialist, I am a communist, vote for me. I mean, it's insanity. So
But
the DNC is petrified of Bernie, petrified if he gets a nomination.
But what does this all mean, Manny? What is the election of Donald Trump? It's a symptom of something that's going on in America. What are we searching for? And we're seeing it now with Bernie. It's the polar opposite of what Trump is. Trump is a capitalist. He's coming in, no political background,
Yep.
right? He's approaching this office from a CEO type of standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're seeing a lot of millennials and a lot of people are looking at Bernie Sanders as the answer. What does this mean?
That's a great question. It's a deep question. I think it means a couple of things, right? So, like if you go out to dinner or something with a couple of friends, and after you eat, maybe you don't feel great, and you like the first thing you do is like you ask your friend like, hey, was that food? Do you feel okay? Like
Right.
you want to know, like, is it you?
Right,
or was it the
right.
food? Like, like if everybody's sick, then it was the food, but maybe you're just sick. So I think what people are testing is, are things are the way they are just because they are that way, or things are the way they are because billionaires make it that way, or the corrupt government, or the deep state, or the swamp, or whatever. So I think that is the mantra, both from Bernie and from Trump. So we start with Bernie. Citizens United's a problem. Corporations are a problem. We should be giving people free stuff. Billionaires are the problem. Everybody who's rich became rich through ill-gotten gains. So Jeff Bezos, he's a bad dude because he's the richest guy in the world, right? Of course he's a criminal because nobody could become a millionaire and a billionaire through busting their ass and working hard. Nope, can't happen.
Or just being lucky.
Exactly, like being born or marrying into the right family, like Meghan Markle, but that's a whole nother topic. But she's turning away from it. And then Trump is the other side of it, saying, look, the system's rigged against little guy, against you. So Bernie's saying the same thing that Trump's saying it. They're coming at it from different perspectives. Trump's saying, I want to cut the red tape, and I want to cut the bureaucracy to make you be able to take care of yourself and you be rich. Bernie's saying, I want to help you because I want to give you free stuff. So they're both saying the same, coming at it from the same argumentative perspective. They're just doing it differently in terms of like, here's the problem. The problem is the system. The problem is the corruption. The problem is the swamp. They're going about it differently.
But
Bernie thinks corporations.
The Bernie route is going to lead us in a path where we really don't want to see that. We don't want to see a world, a United States with Bernie Sanders as our president.
I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. You asked me if anything could impact the market. Two individuals, Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. If you have a wealth tax, look, people don't realize there aren't enough billionaires in the U.S. to pay for the stuff that they claim all these billionaires could pay for.
But what about speaking of billionaires, your buddy right from your state?
I know where you're going with this.
Lil
Mike,
Mini Mike,
yeah.
Mini Mike. He's got a tax initiative that's horrible, just as bad as Bernie.
Okay. So okay. Like people have like a nice car and have like the vanity plate.
Yeah.
So Lil Mike, Bitty Mike, he's rich. He's a billionaire. God bless him. He's a super talented entrepreneur, businessman. He built the Bloomberg empire up from nothing.
I love Bloomberg. Yeah.
Fair enough. But he's close to 80. And I think he wants to put on his resume that before he died, he ran for president. If you're going to run for president, you should have started earlier. You can't buy the presidency in terms of buying commercials because people just don't care. And I think his whole angle with this tax that you're talking about, and his whole angle with I'm so rich, I'm going to buy all these commercials, but yet I'm a Democrat, and yet I'm empathetic and sympathetic to the minority community. When he was a
Yeah,
Republican, I
right.
guess with a little R, when he was a New York mayor, and had stop and frisk in New York,
I
which was very
know. People,
controversial.
black people won't forget that. I'm sorry.
No, how could you? I mean, he's just doing what he needs to be told. What I call like front runnerism. So like at one point, when I was a kid growing up, like I liked the Pittsburgh Pirates and I like Willie Stargell, because I was a big baseball fan. But I was really a Yankees fan. But that year the Pirates won, and it was like we are family with the Pirates. And I got a Pirates hat, and I had like
Oh,
the
we do that a
wristbands, like
lot here in Detroit. Believe me.
that's what I mean. So like if
My
your team
team.
loses, so he wants to do with the front runner. So Elizabeth Warren saying free tuition. Oh yeah, we should have free tuition. Oh yeah, the government is racist. Yeah, ignoring his policies when he was mayor of New York for 12 years, 3 terms, right? Three,
But
4 year
the
terms.
thing is, yeah, the throwing billions at commercials clearly lets you know that he doesn't understand the landscape we're in when it comes to getting people to vote for you. You see what Trump did
Exactly.
with Cambridge Analytica,
Yes.
right? They took a different approach. It wasn't the typical approach to trying to get people over to your side. I hope he's looking at more than just throwing money at
I don't think I mean,
commercials.
that's a great question, and he's assuming. Now, I've been trying to do more stuff in the media as well, and you got a great following, and thanks for the invitation to be on your show. But you realize that people are going to watch this on demand. I have 2 children.
Right.
My son's 19, my daughter's 20. They don't watch TV,
Exactly.
live TV.
No.
So, absent like a sporting event, a Super Bowl, Knicks game, whatever, a baseball game, but my son's not watching TV. So
Mm-mm.
all these commercials are kind of like really flushing money down the toilet bowl because
Yep.
nobody's watching TV, let alone commercials. People like either get up and go to the bathroom, get a drink or something during a commercial. If you're watching anything, that's live,
Yep.
so it's like a waste of money. What I think would be great would be if Bernie, kind of went out there and spoke with Bloomberg and said, look, maybe you support me, or Elizabeth Warren. I think little Mike, Mayor Mike, would be better served if he backed one of the candidates. Clearly hates Trump. So fine, let him, take it out on Trump through a candidate who actually could get the
Yeah, because
nomination. I didn't
really
say win, not
they're
win the general, but get the nomination.
they're just cannibalizing themselves over there in the DNC. they're
Yeah, I mean, if
just
you look,
they're just
so
killing each other.
100%. And someone told me the interesting phenomenon. If you look at Elizabeth Warren, she is very much like Bernie. Like
Pocahontas.
her base, Pocahontas, exactly. Her base is exactly like Bernie. So they take votes away from each other. So if you look at
Right.
Bernie had
Right.
26% and she had 14%, boom, Bernie would have 40%. Lil
Yep.
Pete would be a non-factor. The only
Yes.
reason Lil Pete won, if I could call him Lil Pete and Lil Mike, maybe a Lil Pete and then Mini Mike, Mini Me Mike. But the point is the reason that he won, it looks like he's winning Iowa, is because of Elizabeth Warren. At one point, again, they're going to have to figure out it's either her or Bernie, and I think it's going to be
Right.
Bernie that she's going to get behind, maybe as the maybe she's hanging in there, so she's the VP for Bernie or something, which I think would be the worst ticket in the history, of this country, or clearly the last 4, 5, 6 presidential campaigns, a la Sarah Palin. I think it would be McCain, Palin-ish again, and McCain didn't do that bad, but Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, because they're so much alike, and because they keep talking about the socialist nonsense, they'd be they would be destroyed as far as I'm concerned.
Well, Manny, it's been a pleasant surprise having you on, man. It was just a random, like I said, guys. I went through and saw, picked a random person almost that was following me on Twitter, and it's been a great conversation. I definitely want to have you back on. Where can people find you, Manny?
Oh, great. Thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, that's my Twitter. They can find me on Twitter at Manny Alicandro, MannyAlicandro. I'm on Facebook and I'm on LinkedIn. You could just, Google search me, and, love if people want to, connect with me and reach out, happy to, talk to people, and always interested in hearing ideas. I think what's great about this is you just reach out to me, and I really appreciate the opportunity. I want people to talk more. Okay, I
Right.
want people, we agree on a lot, and that's great. But I would have done your show even if I disagreed with you. The
Absolutely.
problem
That's how I
is,
am.
the
Yeah.
problem is, you have the guts to reach out to people and not know me and have me on. People won't do that. I'm pretty well spoken, pretty articulate. People won't have me on their show. I want to go on a Democrat show. I want to
Yeah.
go on a show with someone I totally disagree with. You know what? Because at the end of the day, there's probably a lot more that we agree on than people think. But if we never talk, we never come to that point. And I'm in my little corner, they're in their little corner, and we never were able to figure out a solution. So this is great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, there you have it, people. Again, Manny Alicandro. Thanks
Correct. Thank
again
you.
for joining me on this Kicking It session, guys. Definitely hit that thumbs up and leave your feedback in the comments below about all the stuff that we talked. We talked about a wide variety of things. So definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Would you like to have Mr. Manny back on? I definitely do. We out of here, people. Holla.